Hi! In this video you will learn about the absolute basics of the interface in Blender. If you just open up Blender for the absolute first time and you still feel a little bit overwhelmed by all these buttons, then this video is for you. Look at it like a roadmap, a little bit like a Google Maps for Blender. Have fun and let's go! A warm welcome to Blender. What should be greeting you right now is this screen. In the center you can see the so-called splash screen. This usually pops up once you start Blender. Here you can open a new file, recover your last session, or open one of your recent files once you created those. You can make the splash screen disappear by just clicking anywhere on the screen. The first thing I'm now going to do before I'm showing you the interface is hitting F4 on my keyboard or going to Edit Preferences and opening the Preferences, which are the settings of Blender. And there I ramp up the resolution scale, so you can actually see what I'm doing. Here you can see all the different options and adjust them to your heart's desire. In the next lesson, I'm going to show you which settings you need to change to quickly get started. If you are unsure about what I'm doing at any time, please take a look down here on the right and maybe it will become clearer. So now that this is done, let's start with the fundamentals, the different parts of the interface of Blender. In the center, you can see the most important one, the 3D viewport. This is the virtual three-dimensional space inside Blender. In here, our action takes place, the objects are there and everything happens in there basically. And so I will come back to the 3D viewport in much more detail a little bit later. Let's first take a tour through the rest of the interface. The 5 buttons up here on the left refer to the whole program or the whole file in general. The most important points under File are opening a new file, opening a different file. You can also revert the file you're now working with, which is basically going back to the last save point. Of course, you can also save or save a copy. You can import and export different file types. You can also create a new startup file, which then becomes the default condition of a new file once you open one. And of course, you can also quit Blender. Under Edit, you of course find the preferences, but also the menu search, which lets you search for many operations in Blender by their name. Up here, you can also start the rendering. Under Window, you can change the window mode Blender's in, for example, the full screen. And you also have a help button, which leads you directly to the online documentation of Blender. And if you click on the Blender logo on the left, you'll open the splash screen again. Directly next to the general options, you'll find a bar with many different buttons. The different names all refer to different workspaces. Their setup is predefined to make certain tasks in Blender easier. For example, right now we are in Layout. This is a very good basic starting point to get going. If we wanted to sculpt now, we could just click on Sculpting. And Blender has now changed its look, or in the workspace UV editing, which is optimized to put materials and textures onto objects. For starting out, let's just stay in Layout for now. Further to the right, we see that we are currently in the first and only scene and also in the first and only view layer. Both of these options are right now not important to us. But down below, there is the outliner, and that is a very important part of the interface. You can think of it as the Explorer in Windows or the Finder on Mac. You can see those little boxes right here. You could think of them as folders or also layers. And these boxes contain our objects and everything in our 3D scene. The first box is the scene collection, and in it is one new box, which is the collection box. And in there are currently 3 objects: the camera, the cube, and the light. By clicking on the eye on the right, you can hide and show your objects. You can also select things by clicking on them in the outliner. Right below the outliner is one of the most important parts of Blender. It is called the Properties panel, and you can basically change everything here. You can, for example, tweak the rendering settings here, the output format of the render picture. Further down, you can tweak the adjustments of the individual object. You see right now we have selected the cube, so it says cube. And you can, for example, see that our cube is right now at the absolute 0 point, the absolute center. Or you can add different modifiers, which will also be a topic in a later lesson, of course. Further down, you can also define new materials. So to sum it up, there are the general rendering settings for your scene, the settings for the 3D world itself, the settings for the collection, and also the settings for the individual objects, materials, textures, and so on. Let's continue. Down below, here is the timeline. If you put your mouse on the border between these two viewports, it will change into a little double-sided arrow and you can move this border. This you can do with all the windows. You can change their size by moving their borders around. Just like people do with countries in the real world. This is important for animation, and if you click on the play button, you can see that it goes to all the frames from start to finish and then starts again. You can also start the timeline with space. And to finish our wonderful overview tour of Blender, let's quickly take a look at the bar at the bottom. Once you play around with Blender a little bit, you are going to see that the options which are displayed down there do change depending on what you have selected and what you are going to do. Honestly, I don't look down there so often, but I can imagine that it is especially helpful if you are just starting out to find your way around Blender. This video was only a small part of my Skillshare course, Learn Blender, 3D Design for Absolute Beginners. So if you're excited to learn more about Blender, then get yourself 1 free month of Skillshare with a link in the description. I also have some more classes on creativity and 3D over there. And that way you can check out if you are hungry for even more learning material. And you can also find courses of thousands of other highly skilled individuals who can't wait to feed you with their impressive knowledge. So, see you there or in my next video. Bye bye!